Hi, my name is Shweta Singh, and I'm a fixed income portfolio manager at City Different Investments. And we publish a weekly week in review where we look at data, news flow in the financial markets and translate that into what it means for fixed income portfolios. So here we are in the last week of September. Of note was the GDP data that came out last week. So Q2 data was much revised to the upside, where Q2 GDP was 3.8% versus the 3.3% that earlier was projected for Q2 GDP. In addition, Q3 GDP for the US economy also shows a really positive momentum. So the economy seems to be in good shape. The other piece of data that came out of note last week was the core PCE, or the personal consumption expenditure data. Now, the reason this is relevant is this is Fed's favorite inflation measure. And that number came out to be 2.9% year over year inflation data. Now, by itself, this is not a big jump in inflation, if you will, for the month of August. However, what is interesting is that it still remains high versus the 2% inflation mandate that the Fed, self-governs itself by. The other interesting data point that came out last week was the Fed chair when he spoke about fairly highly valued equity market. After he spoke in Rhode Island, we saw the equity markets come down a little bit. And in this week's Week in Review, we look at that versus some of the time that other Fed chairs like Chair Greenspan, Chair Yellen, when they spoke about irrational exuberance or substantially stretched equity markets that Governor Yellen or Chair Yellen referred to. So we examined that in context to this tone of Chair Powell. If you find such commentary interesting, please subscribe to our Week in Review. Thank you.